Hi everybody, welcome to week 9. Hopefully you guys are well on your way to figuring out some of your arguments for the APA unit. I really have enjoyed kind of hearing more about the topics that you're selecting as you have emailed them to me. If anybody hasn't emailed me the topic that you're picking for your APA project, please do that. I will be grading your extended bibliographies this week. Those should be graded by the end of the week. They don't take me very long. But if anybody has, picked a topic that you haven't gotten approved yet, please do that. At this point, I won't make you change your topic, even if it is something that you shouldn't. Well, if it's something you shouldn't be writing about, I'll make you change your topic. But if it's something that's taken, I'll let you take it just because I know you probably will have done a good amount of work already. So, but just email me. I just like to keep in touch with you guys. So anyway, email me if you haven't told me your topic already. I think most people have. I can't think of anyone who hasn't, but I'm sure there's someone out there. I've also already graded all of your MLA papers, so please take a peek at your email and see if you find your video feedback in there. I emailed everyone video feedback. I think most of your videos are like 20 minutes long just because I had so much to say, a lot of praise. Most of those papers were phenomenal. I thought you guys did a really good job. And you might be my first class just who was overall holistically very successful with your papers. So thank you guys. You're doing really awesome. Okay, so let's talk about what you want to do this week. The first thing, let me jump into weekly assignments, but the first thing that I'll talk about really quickly is just the 2 things that are due this week. Usually once a major assignment has been due, for example, the extended bibliography that was due last week, on Sunday, usually then you have an off week where you don't have a major assignment due, and then you have another with the following week, like an on week where you do have a major assignment due. This isn't the case, however, this week. So you do have part of a major assignment due this week in addition to your quiz. So just keep that in mind as you're progressing through the assignments this week, that you also want to be spending some time focusing on your handout for this discussion. So I'm going to pop into the week 9 learning module so that I can show you what it is I'm talking about. What I want you to do in this, and to begin with this module, is to review the guidelines for your discussion. So that's the second part of our APA unit. In our MLA unit, we had an annotated bibliography, we had a research proposal, and then we had our final paper. In the APA unit, we have the extended bibliography that you just turned in, and then we have a discussion, and then we have our final paper. The reason that we have this discussion is because a lot of the times as you're doing research in when you're writing scholarly papers and as you're doing research for your major and things like that, your instructor or your cohorts or your peers or your colleagues will be curious to know what you're doing, and you want to be able to talk about your research with others. It's such an important part of the research process. So it's not enough to just be able to write down your research process and show some examples of your research process like we practice with the MLA unit. It's also crucial that you can talk about it with others, and especially like in this case, when you have controversial research or controversial arguments or something like that, you want to be able to find ways that you can present them and have an open dialogue. So that's kind of the point of this segment of our class, is to prepare you for future instances where you have to talk about the research that you're doing, and even if your research might be something that you don't want to talk about. So that's the point, and I'm going to talk more about this whole assignment here for you guys. Okay. So with your handout and discussion, let's take a look at the assignment sheet, and I will read through it and I'll pause at various locations whenever I need to. As always with your first initial assignments before that final paper, it's 100 points or 10% of your final grade. You'll turn it in via a discussion board. So you've most likely been familiar with a discussion board either in another online class or maybe you did the week 8 extra credit discussion. Thank you to those of you who did. I know there's some people who participated in that. Awesome. I'll be looking forward to grading those as well. But you'll turn it in a discussion, which is different from how you've turned in most of the assignments this semester. Usually you've either taken a quiz or you've just submitted your document to Blackboard's submission portal. The difference here is that you'll actually be writing and attaching a file to the discussion board where other people can see your work in addition to just me, and so that's your classmates. So you'll turn in your handout at the end of this week in week 9, and then in week 10 you will respond to your classmates' handouts. Your handout is going to kind of function as like a little presentation of your ideas, and so then you'll also submit a paragraph explanation of your ideas along with your handout, and then your classmates can hear what you're saying and respond, with some, I think this is interesting research. Have you thought about talking about this? What are your research limitations? And just kind of addressing your research in an open dialogue. Okay, so let's first talk about this handout that you're going to submit. Your handout can be, it can be as many pages as you want it to be, but I would encourage you to keep it short, sweet, and simple. I would encourage you to have maybe 1 page or possibly 2 pages, but you're going to create this handout, and essentially if we were meeting face-to-face, what I have my face-to-face students do is bring their handouts to class on the day that they are going to be presenting their research. And when I say presenting their research, again, I don't mean like with a PowerPoint up in front of the class. We all sit around a table in a circle, and my students hand out their handouts to everyone so that they have that research in front of them, and they just talk for 20 minutes about their research projects, what research they've been doing so far, where they still need to go, what their potential thesis statement is going to be. They talk a little bit about their case study and how it's going to inform their argument. So this is really an informal discussion. It's low stakes. You shouldn't feel, if you were to be in class with me, I wouldn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable talking about their research, because this is just the nature of doing research, is that you're sharing it with others. So your handout will essentially accompany your round table discussion that presents your paper's argument. At this stage in your research, you should have fully formulated an argument, researched the minimum number of sources, which I'll see on your extended bibliographies, and found some specific primary and secondary sources that you could discuss specifically in your handout. On your handout, you need to have a minimum of 7 headings. I'll show you an example of kind of what I mean by headings here in a minute. 5 of these have to be the following. They have to be your thesis statement, has to be an overview of your topic, has to be a discussion of rhetoric, meaning language. So, go back to the extended bibliography assignment sheet and look at the definition of rhetoric. What is rhetoric? Make sure you understand that rhetoric is, the language that's used to talk about your topic. And so part of what we're analyzing here is language. You have to talk about areas for further research. So in this section, I mean, what research do you still need to do, or what research could someone else do if they wanted to take your project in a different direction or to extend your project. And then you also have to have references. Remember I said that you have to have 7 headings. So the other 2 headings can be any headings that you choose. If you're not sure, I would encourage you to look at all of the samples that I provide this week, and maybe see what some other people have done. I have created a handout guide for you that looks like this. And so this is really just a basic very linear, boxy looking structure. If yours looks just like this, that's perfectly fine. However, if you're more creative, if you want to experiment with images and visuals and color and background things, some people, actually no one's ever done this, but I've seen it done in other classes. Some people have, hand drawn their handouts and really done something very creative. And if that's you, if your brain is creative, then go for it. So here's just an overview, of what I need you to put in your handout. And under each heading, you'll notice that there's an explanation of what I'm looking for within that section. So please be sure to check this out. Make sure that you're using the same topic that you've been using this whole time. If you want to change your topic, that's okay. You just have to make sure that it's not on the already claimed topics list here. Make sure that, someone else hasn't already selected that topic and that you're not encroaching on someone else's territory. Let's see here. Okay, so that's the handout that you're going to create. And I will show you a couple of samples here. In this folder, I've got 9 examples for you, but we can look at a couple together. So somebody did a case study on 13 reasons why, and again, it's very linear, but they did experiment with some images here. Someone talked about the hashtag relationship goals. I believe this is also very linear. Yes, very similar to the handout guide, but here's an example of a successful handout. Oh, I like this one. Brows on fleek. Get to brows. Look at those eyebrows. Okay, so she's kind of experimenting with memes and images and just a lot of visual here. I like her project. So this is kind of what I mean when I say handout. You're compiling your ideas and your research into a document that you could essentially give to someone and say, here's what I'm talking about in my paper. Okay, now that's what is due at the end of this week, is your handout. I'll get to the specifics of that in a second, but I also want to go over the discussion. I'll talk a little bit more about this in the week 10 video, but just to introduce this whole project, this part of the project, I want to talk about the discussion. So in week 10, you will spend this week responding to your classmates' ideas. You'll look at all of their handouts. You'll make sure that you've replied to your own handout with a paragraph explanation of your argument. So your handout won't just be the only thing that your classmates have to respond to. You'll also have a paragraph explaining your ideas, explaining how you're going to be analyzing your case study and how you're applying it to your overall social media argument. You'll pick 3 of your classmates to respond to. Essentially, you want to begin an open-ended and academic conversation about how social media influences us, and particularly based on their topic. Okay. Once you've responded to 3 classmates initially, then you'll return to each of those classmates' posts 2 more times. So for each classmate, you should reply 3 total times. So your initial post and 2 replies. 1, 2, 3. That means that in addition to your handout and your paragraph, you will have 9 posts somewhere in this discussion board. That means that you'll have a total of 10 posts, because you'll have your post with your handout and your paragraph, and then you will have 9 additional posts to your classmates. I also expect you to, throughout the week, and this is in week 10, so I am kind of getting ahead of myself just as a reminder, but I want to talk about the whole project. In week 10, I do expect you to go through and back through your post and see about what your classmates are saying to you so that you can then reply to them as well. So just be prepared for next week, because I do expect you to kind of check the discussion board daily or every other day at a minimum. Your handout should be brief. I really don't want you to have more than 2 pages. I don't want your classmates to have to read too much. That's not the point of this. In terms of research requirements, I expect your handout to kind of stem from the research that you've already done, but of course, if there's more research that you need to be doing to get you to your final paper, then continue your research in this section of the project as well. Other than making sure your references section is formatted in APA citation style, there's no format requirements for this. So even though you'll see a lot of the sample handouts are very formulaic and they follow a very linear structure, that's not necessarily a requirement. Again, if you want to be really creative, you're more than welcome to, as long as you are providing a document, so something that we can look at. I do not want anyone to really be giving me a PowerPoint presentation, just because that usually means multiple slides, but you can experiment with other things if you want to. If anybody's familiar with Prezi, you could experiment with that. Mind mapping, you could experiment with. If you're unsure of what to do, definitely send me an email because I could, give you some more insight. In some instances, there's some software out there that might be a little bit tricky to navigate, but in other instances, it could actually be nice to look at something new. So if you have a question, if you're kind of thinking of something creative, maybe just run it by me before you do it if it's something new. In terms of grading, we can look at the rubric together. Grading you based on your handout and your formatting and your quality of discussion. So is your handout something that I can read? Does it present an overview of your research? And are there any grammar errors? References are formatted in APA style, and that you, in terms of formatting for your handout, you have the 7 headings, the 5 required ones, and then 2 of your choice. I'm also looking at quality of discussion. Are you staying on topic? Are you making sure that your conversations are academic? Are you avoiding, any kind of issues that could come up when we have controversial topics like name calling and, slanderous remarks or whatever. I'm also, of course, going to just be counting the number of discussions posts that you create to make sure that you're following those basic rules as well. So just keep all this rubric stuff in mind for this week and next week. There's not very many penalties, but here's some things to note. Again, your handout is due at the end of this week. That's April 15th. Make sure you post it on time. If you post your handout late, it will receive minus 1 point per day late. Also, for next week, so this is very, very important, our discussion is going to end on April 22nd. So that's at the end of week 10. Once our discussion has ended, I'm going to close the discussion board and you won't be able to participate in it any longer. So just know with this discussion, you can't turn it in late because we will have moved on by then and nobody will be going back to check on it. So keep that in mind. I'm going to close out the handout and presentation or discussion guide and kind of show you what's in the learning module for this week. So again, just really, I already talked about this. What's going on? What's happening here? Let's look at the specifics here. So this is kind of a rundown of what steps to take. Post your handout to this discussion board by April 15th. So that's the end of this week. If you don't know how to attach a file to the discussion board, I've given you a tutorial here. Then next week in week 10, you can do the rest of the stuff. So by the end of this week, you have to have created your handout and posted to the discussion board. Otherwise, it's -1 point per day late. Then by the end of week 10, you have to have completed your discussion, and I'm closing the discussion board at the end of week 10, so just keep that in mind. Okay, in this learning module, you can find the guidelines that we just went over. You can find the already claimed topics list as well, and along with the handout guide here. You can also find 9 sample handouts if you want to take a look at these and see what other people have done. I've also included a sample discussion for you because I wanted to show you a discussion from a student last semester that was phenomenal. He did an awesome job, and this here, the first thing in this folder is his handout and the paragraph that he provided as his paragraph explanation. And then the second thing that you'll see in this folder is his comments and replies, just kind of what another student wrote to his handout and to his research, and the replies that he made on those comments. So again, here's the comment and a reply, a comment and a reply. And what I love about this discussion is that it's engaging. I mean, this student really spent time contemplating his project and the project that he's commenting on here. So please take a look at least a few of these comment and reply segments here, because the student earned 100% on this portion of the assignment, and I just think it's so good I couldn't not share it with you guys. Okay, so what else is happening this week? In addition to, again, making sure that you have your handout ready to go and submitted to the discussion board by Sunday, April 15th, you also want to go over credible versus non-credible sources, and I've got a couple of activities for you guys here. Some things that you can read about, reading about credible sources, reading about evaluating sources, learning more, doing some practice, some supplemental instruction on credible sources. So really just making sure that as you're finding those secondary sources for your APA paper, that you're finding credible sources. And that is the nature of the quiz this week. It's 20 points. You only have one attempt because it's A or B. I think it's a true-false quiz. Let's take a peek and see. I can't say for sure.